Sam for Bloody Brilliant Games, still here at EGX 2021, and I'm here with Andrew from Pixelate, who's been very, very kind to join us to talk about Clash of the Metal and Formula Retro Racing. We'll start with Formula Retro Racing. It gives me very, very strong calls back to the old Formula 1 games. Was that what you were kind of going for, in less of the arcadey style?
Yeah. So having kind of grown up around the old arcade games in the 90s, racing games, we wanted to create a homage to those old early 90s racers. So created Formula Retro Racing. It's like got the art style and feel of an old arcade game, but we wanted to put in like more modern handling and controls and physics. So it's kind of like best of both worlds.
And in terms of the art style, as it goes back to that old style of racing game, it's a very, very kind of eye-catching art style. Were there any other art styles you consider maybe kind of like a more subtle or realistic art style before you ended up on this style?
Well, we did try various art styles to start with, and so we did an anime style kind of outline, toon shaded style, a bit like Auto Modelista, which came out a few years ago on the GameCube. And then trouble is, though, to keep it like honest to like the old 90s style, we want to keep it low poly, simple graphics. So it's actually a struggle to restrain ourselves in order to keep the graphics as simple as possible. To have things like shadows and reflections creeping in, and the next thing you know, and all sorts of VFX. Next thing you know, it's actually no longer like 90s style. It just looks like a bad modern game. So
And in terms of the tracks, talk about the tracks for a moment. So the first track you've got in this demo is kind of very much an IndyCar style track. Then you go to more kind of like Monte Carlo and all those kind of things. How important was it for you to almost pay homage to the different cultures of racing with the different tracks you've got in this game?
So we wanted to keep it as varied as possible. So one thing I wanted personally to put in was a recreation of Monaco, because that's like my personal favourite Grand Prix circuit. So we have Monte Carlo in the game. Then there's like a banked oval, which allows for game mechanics like really crazy crashes and destruction physics. And then there's a few other kind of fictional tracks and a few GP circuits. And then later on in the game, there's some like really crazy ones, like a forest circuit, which is totally inappropriate to Formula cars, but it's all light-hearted and for the fun of it.
And if we've moved on to Clash of the Metal, it's very much kind of it seems like an anime style kind of fighter. Can you talk about like where the inspiration came for this game?
So this one has literally only been in development for a few months now.
Wow.
So we brought it to the show kind of early on to get feedback. But the inspiration is I love fighting games and I love anime and love mechs and robots and that sort of thing. So why not fuse them together? So I've been working for a while on this kind of rendering pipeline, which creates like the animated style look, sort of hand-drawn look with 3D models. So behind the scenes, it's actually a 3D game, but running in a kind of 2D style. And inspirations are like the Guilty Gear series and Marvel vs. Capcom, but wanted to create something a bit different, so out of that came this. So as you can probably tell, the art style is pretty kind of adventurous, I'd say is the word, like the monochrome backgrounds and the garishly coloured foreground sprites. So we wanted to do something different whilst making a fighting game which is fun to play.
And when it comes to making this type of fighting game, of course, as you say, there's so many, like in Marvel vs. Capcom, there is standard Street Fighter series, Tekken, all those kind of things. How tricky is it when making this type of title to kind of make something original, whether it be the moveset or even just something as the health bars on the interface?
I think it's more of like taking a game that for us it's taking a game that we liked, Marvel vs. Capcom, because that was mechanics in that are kind of more beginner friendly. So we looked at that, and then we looked at how can we switch it up a bit to maybe merge in elements from Street Fighter. We've merged in some elements from some really old PS1 fighting games which are a little bit obscure, and like take bits from here and there, like best bits from some games, and add in our own unique touches as well. Like we've got some kind of new combos and special moves which haven't really been used before. So it's kind of, we're aiming to make it more of a light-hearted game than like your hardcore professional kind of fighting esports title.
And then final question on Clash of the Metal, in terms of the story mode that I can see you've got, is it going to be a case of playing as different characters, with that's always the direction that fighting games go for, or are you pitching it as kind of a central protagonist?
Well, to be honest, we haven't actually worked out the story mode yet. We haven't planned, so that's the next thing we're going to be working on. But visually, what we're aiming for is like a manga-style comic book, so black and white, hand-drawn, where you flip the pages between each battle, and like the story progresses through there, and then you play through the characters, good and bad. But yeah, I mean the story's yet to be worked out. But that's kind of style we're going for. So I want to make it more interactive, so you can choose your direction through the visual storyline, and then each one's interspersed with one of the battles. So.
And then with regard to these two games, can you tell us what platforms they're coming out from? I'm not sure if my viewers could see the platforms, what time they're coming out and when they're going to be coming out.
So Formula Retro Racing, that actually came out in May last year on Steam and Xbox, so it's out now on Steam and Xbox, coming out on PlayStation 4, PS5, hopefully the end of this month, if not early November. And Clash of the Metal is actually still very early in development, as I was saying, so we brought it to the show well in advance, but we're looking at like Q2 2022 for that. So but you can wishlist it now on Steam, and we'll be getting the store pages up on the console. So that's also going to be coming PS4, PS5, Xbox One and the Xbox Series consoles.
Perfect, thank you very much for your time, Andrew.
Thank you.
A big thank you to Andrew from Repixelated for giving us some of his time and showing us Clash of the Metal and Formula Retro Racing. Let's talk about the latter first. Formula Retro Racing is most definitely a throwback to the old style of Formula Racing games, as Andrew mentioned in that interview. I like a lot of things about that game. The stylized is something that a lot of other developers have done. I think, for example, Hot Shot Racing did that very much stylized, but I think the very simplistic aesthetic can really work for a racing game. The handling mod on the braking was really good, a lot better than other arcade style racing games, a lot more preferable to at least me. The other thing that I really liked was the AI. The AI is really aggressive from what I experienced. There were a couple of times where going around a corner I was battled off the side of the track and actually ended up being destroyed because of the AI, because they're battling for position, and that's not something you see in a lot of other racing games. In terms of Clash of the Metal, as Andrew mentioned, that is very early in its development. Fun fighter, I have to say, very fun. The aesthetic, while it looks like it's a bit of a clash of styles, it's certainly one to keep an eye on. But I think with more time, Clash of the Metal could end up being a really decent little fighter. Overall though, Repixelate definitely a studio to keep an eye on, especially with Formula Retro Racing and Clash of the Metal.